I'm Jace Lacob, and you're listening to Masterpiece Studio. After the roller coaster that was last season, Grantchester's newest vicar, Reverend Alphy Kottaram, is settling into his new role in his new community. As he builds his new life, Alfie now turns his attention to finding someone to spend his evenings with, someone other than the ever-loyal Dickens. It seems as if Alfie has found the perfect match in librarian Meg, who is clever, beautiful, and shares his love of books. What could possibly go wrong?
My lord, Reverend Kottaram.
Dad?
Dad.
I was going to mention it.
A sense of belonging is ever present in Alfie's mind. He has been welcomed into Grantchester and adopted by the village as one of their own, but now he's confronted with an even deeper question of identity and must figure out his place within this new community as well as the wider world. What does it mean to Alfie to be an Anglo-Indian vicar in a small British village?
I'm not a convert. I chose this. I grew up with it. Bible stories before bed every night.
And you think that what the church has made you into, that's true to who you really are?
This is who I am.
In episode 4, we get a glimpse into Alfies Past as an unexpected phone call pulls him right back to the foundling home where he grew up.
Are you sure you're up for this?
Without question.
It'll only be for a few days. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't an emergency.
Take as long as you need. Family first.
Thank you.
But what Alfie discovers may shock him to his very core. Today, actor Rishi Nair joins us to explore belonging, romance, and the reveal of Alphy Kottaram's past. And this week we are joined by Grantchester star Rishi Nair. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me again.
So the last time we spoke was before Series 9 of Grantchester premiered in the States and in the UK, and you were settling into your role as the nation's premier crime-solving vicar. How has your life changed since Alfie's first Grantchester series premiered?
I wouldn't say it's changed a lot, to be honest. It's pretty much still the same. But yeah, a few more people are recognizing me now as Alfie in comparison to some of the other characters I've played on TV before, so that's new. And yeah, I think that's about it. That's about all that's changed, really.
So you're not getting that kind of like vicar glow that people are suddenly like much nicer to you because they think you're an actual vicar.
Do you know what? When people do stop me now, I do make a joke with them sometimes because they, I tell them if they want to kind of tell me all their sins, I'm all ears, you know? So I've had some good stories told to me, but I'm not sure I should probably repeat those.
Oh, let's not talk out of school, no. With Series 9, you have that sort of baton-passing season with Tom Brittney's Will, and even though you didn't appear on screen together, it's a transitional season with Alfie taking over for Will. With Series 10, however, you're no longer the new kid on the block. How comfortable did it feel then, returning to put on that dog collar for Series 10?
Yeah, it's funny because obviously it's my second season that I'd done, but it felt so familiar coming back, even though I'd only just done one season, kind of putting on the same clothes again and working with all the same cast and a lot of the same crew. It almost felt like coming back home in a strange sense. And for Alfie, we come into season 10, and like you said, he is no longer the new kid on the block. He's kind of settled in. We're picking it up a year later from season 9. And he's kind of got his new found family there. And yeah, he's really enjoying life in Grantchester. And I think myself, Rishi, the actor, kind of echoes that as well. It kind of feels like going back to a family and just really enjoying being on set and working with such great, talented people.
I love the use of the word family here because as I watched the first episodes of Series 10, something stuck in my head from the end of Series 9 when cult leader Sam said to Alfie,
You've never felt wanted. Don't even try. Yeah, that's it. Isn't it? You don't know what it is to be wanted. No home, no family, no love. You have no idea who I am. I have everything that you don't have, and you can't bear it.
And it clearly touched this raw nerve in Alfie. When in the process did you learn about Alfie's past as a foundling? Were you aware of that even prior to Series 9?
That was never a thing for Alfie, that he was a foundling. And I think we'd shot maybe the first 2 or 3 episodes. And then Emma and Daisy came up with this idea and wanted to speak to me. And they came into my trailer and they told me this idea of, we actually think that Alfie should be a foundling and we think this would add so much more to it. And I was like, this is brilliant. I loved it. So actually, for the first 3 episodes, none of us knew that Alfie was a foundling. And then I think Daisy and Emma decided that this would be a great thing to add to the show, which I'm so glad they did, because it has given us so much more to play with and has given us such a great option to go somewhere for season 10 as well.
Alfie presents himself as this quintessential English vicar, born in Romford, raised in the church. But in episode 2 of this series, that identity is questioned by an Anglo-Indian professor who wonders if he's pretending to not be an outsider.
It doesn't get more quintessentially British than the vicar of a quaint little village. You'll tell me next that your police friend accepts you too.
That's not fair. Geordie's a good man.
He's using you. Walking around with a handsome Indian vicar, everyone assuming he's moral and accepting and not the fist of the status quo.
Now you're judging.
Raised by the church, seeing the world through their eyes. You trust all the wrong people.
And your sorry's in the wash, is it?
I wish you could see how much you've been skewed.
What did you make of the Bright Sorry speech in episode 2 and Alfie's exchange with Professor Joshi?
I think it's probably something that Alfie has experienced his whole life, because he is a foundling and he is very clearly a brown man. He's born as this brown Indian man in England, but actually he's not brought up by anyone Indian. He's brought up by somebody called Reverend Potts, who's a reverend and in charge of this foundling home. So he's kind of grown up around him and what you would imagine would be a very high majority of white English kids in that foundling home. And so I don't think Alfie's had any kind of upbringing or learn anything about his kind of Indian culture. And so I think probably as his life progresses, he's probably come across people like Professor Joshi that look at him and don't see a typical British Indian kid, because he doesn't really know anything about his culture. And so Professor Joshi kind of picks up on that. And obviously no one knows why. No one knows that he's a foundling and he's chosen not to tell anyone, but people pick up on that and kind of, yeah, I guess she's kind of like, what's going on here? She first accuses him of, like you said, kind of just pretending and putting this mask on, or she then says that Geordie is using Alfie because for whatever reason that might be. And I think that hits a nerve for Alfie, because I think in all honesty, I think he is confused by it himself. He isn't really sure where he belongs, this whole kind of nature nurture debate. And obviously, yeah, growing up in the 60s and being brown would have been tough, and you would have stood out even more than you would now. You know, there was much less diversity then. So yeah, would have been tough.
I mean, I love the fact that after this exchange, he then makes samosas, which he calls
Yeah.
an identity crisis on a plate, which is amazing. Is this an attempt then to sort of reclaim some of his heritage, albeit a heritage that he doesn't really know much about?
I think so, yeah. I think he feels, in a sense, kind of guilt towards that, towards not having any idea about his culture, about this country where his parents have come from. You know, I imagine him kind of as a kid in a foundling house, kind of looking at himself in the mirror thinking, why do I look different? You know, because there's no one there to explain why you are different. I think growing up, just as myself, as growing up in a British Asian, you have these kind of identity questions a lot anyway. I'm born in England, I live here, and I'm always kind of referred to as the Indian guy. And then I go to India and I'm always referred to as the English guy. It's kind of like, you know, you don't really kind of know where you belong. You're kind of always the outsider wherever you go. So for me, that's something I've questioned. So I imagine for Alfie, that never had kind of an Indian family and that upbringing, he then is trying to claw back anything he can and kind of going home and making a samosa maybe makes him feel a little bit less guilty about not knowing anything about his culture and upbringing.
And I think it's interesting, too. He is a character who, in his first appearance, is accused of being a thief simply because of the color of his skin. He doesn't have, as you said, sort of parents to turn to sort of provide a foundation for his heritage or his identity as an Asian person in Britain. I think that would add this sort of deeper complexity to his identity, being raised without parents, being raised without the guidance of someone who looks like him. Do you feel like that becomes sort of a major crux of his struggle this series?
I think so. I think there's a part of that. And I think it all kind of has a knock-on effect. This kind of uncertainty, like when Professor Joshi says but something along the lines of like, you're so naive, you can't even see that they're using you. It kind of then plants that seed in Alfie's head and he starts thinking, is Geordie using me? And it kind of puts a slight strain on that relationship. And then a relationship that he has with Meg, who is a character that we meet in season 10, and they kind of, I guess, fall for each other. And it kind of affects his romantic relationship in that sense as well, because then he starts thinking, is Meg using me for something? Being the kind of, I don't know, token Asian person in town, or I don't know. It really has this knock-on effect for him. And we see it affecting his relationships with other people. And I'm not sure Alfie's ever really gone that deep into it before. I think he's kind of just tried to ignore these questions and just try and get on with life. I mean, I think life's been quite difficult for him anyhow, and I don't think he's really had the time to kind of delve too much into this. But this season, we kind of really see that explored more. And I think Alfie's probably gone a bit deeper than he ever has before. And in episode 4, he goes back to his foundling home where he was brought up. And I think there a lot of his secrets are unraveled. And Alfie kind of goes back to his past and confronts his past without ever actually wanting to. I don't think he's ever wanted to do that. I think he's very much someone that looks forward, don't look back. But he is kind of forced to go back and look back. And I think that uncovers some wounds that he has been hiding for years.
Before this next question, a brief word from our sponsors. Ocean voyages, expeditions, river journeys. Viking is dedicated to bringing travelers closer to the destination, offering a small ship experience and a shore excursion in every port. Learn more at Viking.com. I love episode 4. It's an episode that's really brilliantly rooted in horror movie tropes, as Alfie has to sort of confront the ghost of his own past. What did you think of episode 4 when you first read Nessa's script?
Do you know what? I'm with you as well. I absolutely loved episode 4. When I first read it, my first initial thought was, this doesn't feel like Grantchester. It felt so far removed from Grantchester. And I absolutely loved that. What I kept calling it the rogue episode, because it was just like so out there. And it obviously being so emotionally charged for Alfie, I think it's the first time we kind of see Alfie come out of this, how do I describe it? He has this kind of exterior, he's very confident and self-assured. And I think in episode 4, we really kind of go almost within Alfie and we see the cracks and we see him for who he really is. And that I really liked. The secret of being a foundling finally coming out was also nice to kind of give that burden to Geordie and to see what happens with that. Because obviously Alfie has this kind of fear of, Geordie's going to find out that I'm a foundling and that I've lied to him and he's no longer going to want to be my friend and I'm going to lose this whole family that I've now got. And actually, when he tells Geordie, you see the reaction is not like that. And, Geordie loves Alfie for who he is, no matter whether he was a foundling or not.
I mean, it does show when he opens up to Geordie just how far he's sort of come in this process and journey. But there's also some shame there as well and a bit of guilt.
What is this? This is my home. This is where I grew up, Geordie. This is the man who raised me.
How did you look to play that moment where Alfie reveals his history to Geordie?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of shame and guilt there. I think just being an orphan, I think Alfie's perspective on that, especially trying to be someone in this institution of the church, I think that's kind of maybe why he's not wanted to ever tell anyone, because, his opportunities of getting anywhere in this institution, being of the background he is already kind of against the odds. And he doesn't want to add to that by then being a foundling. And I think there is some shame there of just feeling abandoned and feeling like he doesn't have anyone that kind of loves him or looks out for him. which is really quite sad, really. And I think Alfie's way of dealing with that is just ignoring it and just trying to move forward in life and kind of not think about the past and not think about the reasons why his parents didn't ever want him, and kind of just keep moving forward. And I think it's only when he goes back to the foundling home that he has to revisit this past. And I think the letter that Potts gives him at the end of the episode from his mother, I think it's a strange one for Alfie, because I think in a way, he's kind of getting an answer to maybe a question he's always asked his whole life of like, why did my parents leave me? But on the flip side, he's already come to terms with not having that answer, and he's at peace with it. And so this letter is kind of, I guess, a can of worms, and it's whether he wants to open that can of worms and go into that, because he knows that it probably just won't end there. It's going to be deep, and there's going to be more questions that come from getting this one answer. And so, yeah, trying to portray that, I think for me in episode 4, as an actor, was just trying to portray the kind of emotional vulnerability that Alfie has. I think that was important to get across, because I don't think we'd seen that from him before. And the struggle of telling Geordie the truth. But then, like you said, even that line that he says, that even though he has this shame about it, he still feels very proud of his upbringing, and he defends Potts, and he really wants to give these children a chance in life, because he was once one of those. And so, yes, there's shame, but he's also very proud of it. And he wants, I guess at the moment, he tells Geordie, he wants Geordie to know, and this is who I am. And, that's kind of, he puts all his cards out on the table.
Potts is the closest thing that Alfie's ever known to a father, and I think it's telling that Alfie follows this surrogate father into the church, so that he too receives a calling. Mm. What role do you think the Church of England played in his life as a child? Was it, as in the form of Potts, sort of this stabilizing influence that he looked for or craved?
Yeah, I think it was definitely Potts that kind of brought him into this world of the Church of England and into this world of faith. And I think, like you said, it kind of goes to this nature nurture thing, but he's been nurtured by Potts. That's all he's ever known. He's literally from a baby been born in this orphanage, brought up in this church with Potts. And so I think kind of, in a way, there's only one way he can go towards at the beginning of his life. Obviously, once he gets older, he has a decision to make of whether he wants to, people grow up in families like that, and they either are very religious or they're not. And I think Alfie kind of just goes with what life's thrown at him, and actually he finds a purpose in there, and he finds himself, I guess, a calling from God. And I think because he was left at the orphanage and brought up there, Alfie kind of has this thing that was almost meant to be, like it was a calling from God. He was meant to be there, and now he feels a responsibility of giving that to others. So I think, yeah, Reverend Potts has absolutely shaped Alfie's life. I think he's made him who he is. And I think Alfie's very grateful for that.
There is so much emotion in this episode. We learn over the course of episode 4 that Nurse Butcher is Alfie's childhood friend, Gwen, with whom he grew up at the foundling home. And you and Mariah Gale have this beautiful scene together.
So you were...
I was collecting helicopter seeds
You still do that?
for the children to play with, Alfie. It's curious. Some of us want to stay forever. And some of us go far, far away. Like you did.
That doesn't mean I haven't thought about
Don't say that. Don't say something that isn't true.
Well, it is true.
I know what Potts told you the day you left. Go. Don't look back.
What does Alfie make of Gwen's statement that he never looked back? Does it sting at all?
I think it does, yeah. I think, Alfie hasn't looked back. And he's really taken that and run with it. And I think Alfie's kind of just quite selfishly, as I guess you would in that situation, you're trying to make something of your life. And so you think about yourself and you take that advice of don't look back. And he never has. And I guess because he's never done that, he's never actually really thought about the people that he's left behind. because he's so focused on moving forward. That in episode 4, when he comes back and he meets his childhood friend, Gwen, and she says that to him, I think it's a real kind of stab in the heart, because I think it's the first time Alfie has thought about the people he left behind. And, you know, you see that Gwen has actually dedicated her whole life to this orphanage because that's what gave her life. And Alfie feels like, I think he feels quite guilty at this point in time, because even though he is giving back to his community, he's kind of left everyone behind that he grew up with. And, you know, Pot's there and Gwen's there and things are not going great for them. And here Alfie comes in his red triumph. So, yeah, I think it's definitely a lot of guilt. And I think it's the first time he's ever truthfully thought about the people he's left behind. I think he's been so focused on just moving on with his life that he hasn't even given them a second thought before.
He has grown past these experiences to find a confidence and an optimism that are at odds with his upbringing. But at the same time, Potts has this letter, which we mentioned earlier, from Alfie's mom that was entrusted to him, but he never gave it to Alfie. And Alfie realizes it does connect to those words, to don't look back.
Is everything all right?
I wanted to ask you something, actually. Did my mother leave me anything?
Your mother? She did. She did leave you something.
Why have you never given this to me?
It was never out of malice, Alfie. It was out of love.
Don't look back.
Maybe this is one time when you do. You just take care. You just take great care of yourself. There's no rush, Alfie. It's waited all this time for you. It can wait a little longer. Open it when you're ready. Whenever that may be.
Does Alfie see it as a kindness that Potts concealed this from him? Or would it perhaps have answered some questions for Alfie earlier, questions that maybe he needed answering?
Yeah, I think at the point in time when he finds out about the letter, Alfie doesn't think that there was any kindness involved. I mean, he obviously knows Potts is not a bad person, and I think he understands the reason why Potts did that, but his first initial reaction, I think, is anger. His kind of anger of, you shouldn't have made that decision for me. I should have been given this letter and I should have made a decision whether I wanted to open it or not. So yeah, I think it's anger is his first kind of feeling towards Potts. I think with time, as time goes on, he kind of realizes the reasons why Potts did that, and it was because it was look forward, don't look back. And yeah, I guess maybe getting this letter when Alfie was younger would have helped him. I don't know, maybe it wouldn't have. It's hard to know, but it's certain that it's affecting him now, having this letter. We kind of spoke about it earlier, how it kind of affects his relationships with other people, with Geordie and with Meg. And it kind of spirals him out of control a little bit once he gets that letter. We cut back to him a few times, kind of holding this letter, not knowing whether to open it or not. And I think it's just that realization of once that letter's open, you've got to deal with whatever's in there. And whether Alfie's ready to deal with that, he's not so sure of.
And once he opens that door, he can't really close it again.
Exactly.
This letter becomes this invasive thing in his life. There is such a sadness to Alfie as he leaves the home, this heavy weight that he's now carrying in the form of this letter. And he embraces Gwen, but when it's time, he doesn't hug Potts. He doesn't say anything to Potts, but simply walks past him. And tellingly, he does not look back. But there's so much emotion that cascades across your face. What is Alfie feeling here in this moment of leaving this home once again?
Yeah, I think you're right in terms of there's so much going on for Alfie at this point. It's so kind of hard to describe it as as one emotion, but there's anger towards Potts for not giving him the letter, which I think is the reason why he doesn't hug him. He feels like he's been lied to and betrayed. And like I said, he's just got the letter before he leaves. So emotions are very heightened at this point in time. I would imagine that if Alfie was to leave the next morning, he probably would have had time to think it over, and he probably would have hugged Reverend Potts when he left. But at this point in time, I think it's so raw that he doesn't want to speak to him. He doesn't want to talk about it. And yeah, he leaves and he doesn't look back. And there is a real sadness to that. But there's, he does say to Gwen, if you're ever in Grantchester, come and visit me. So I think what's quite nice about this episode is that Alfie now has actually gone back and, we see his past, and he's gone back into his past and he's picked out some good things there. And even when he's in the orphanage and he's going around and this was my room, I think there's some peace with maybe of going back and just living in that space that he'd obviously grown up with. But yeah, obviously this letter that he has is weighing very heavy on him. And I think that's kind of at the forefront of his mind when he's leaving the orphanage is, I came here to deal with something, but I'm actually coming back home with a much, much bigger problem that I now have to make a decision about.
But he doesn't. He locks it away in a drawer to be opened perhaps later. He has a piece of his history in the form of this letter. He's locked it away. We've learned the truth about his past. What lies ahead for Alfie's arc in the back half of Series 10?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously the letter. We're going to find out whether he opens it or not, and if he does, what it contains. And then, obviously going into the second half of the season, we've met Meg at the beginning of the season, and obviously there's sparks there. They try to deny it, but there is. Then we find out that Meg is actually, in fact, the daughter of the bishop, but then they still try and give it a go. But we think it's, we're going to see what happens with Meg, whether that actually happens or not. And obviously there's something going on with Leonard that people have started to realize. And obviously Leonard is one of Alfie's very close friends. And so that's also something that is on Alfie's mind, and I think he needs to deal with alongside his friend Geordie, of course.
We'll see what happens. Rishi Nair, thank you so very much.
Thank you very much.
Next time, Larry Peters is forced to lay down the law.
The landlord says you've had a skinful. He's asked you to leave multiple times, and you've been, in his words, belligerent.
I'm not belligerent. I'm full of umbrage, yes. I'm umbracious. I am umbraged, sir, but belligerent I don't believe so, no.
The landlord wants you to leave quietly. If you don't leave quietly, I'm going to have to arrest you.
In 2 weeks, actor Bradley Hall joins us to unpack this momentous season for his character, Larry Peters. Masterpiece Studio is hosted by me, Jay Slay-Cobb, produced by Jack Pombriant, and edited by Robin Bissett. Elishaba Etup is our sound designer. The executive producer for Masterpiece is Suzanne Simpson.